Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of May 2nd, and it gives me a lot of pleasure to bring on our next guest, the one and only Howard Mandel, longtime jazz journalist and president of the Jazz Journalists Awards. He's originally a Chicago guy, went to New York and came back to Chicago. He's worked for National Public Radio. He's taught at New York University and a number of other places, has books out, writes, quite a guy. And good afternoon to you, Howard.
Thanks, Michael. Nice to be here.
Thanks for coming on. Well, let's start off with the Jazz Journalists Awards, what they are and who's, I know that they're in now, so we might have some winners. Give us a little bit of an overview of the awards.
Well, the Jazz Journalists Association is the organization that I preside over. And for 30 years, we've run international jazz awards by polling our membership. We currently have about 250 members all over the world. And we vote on 44 categories this year of excellence, both in jazz and in jazz journalism. I think we're the only poll that really identifies excellence in media work, in broadcasting, photography, writing, live production, streaming, books, etc. So our members vote on both the Journalist Awards and the Excellence in Music Awards. Formerly, when I was living in New York City, we would have big gala events for the award winners and for anybody who came at major venues. But since I've been back in Chicago since 2014, we've mostly not done that. We're not doing big award events in New York anymore, and it doesn't make much sense to do them in Chicago, sad to say. But we do online events for them. And so just 2 weeks ago, we had a major innovative, I think, Zoom party for our jazz heroes. And those are people who we call activists, advocates, altruists, aiders and abettors of jazz. These are people who aren't typically musicians, or if they are musicians, they're getting awards for community-oriented work that they do. Things that support the music in general, are not self-serving. They can be educators, they can be healthcare providers, people who run clubs, record label people. There's just the vast number of support services that keep jazz alive. We honor them. So we had a hour and a half Zoom session with breakout rooms. People were discussing jazz fests, what makes a great one. They were talking about jazz mentorship. How do we convey information to younger generations? They talked about jazz venues. How do you survive, keep a venue open in this kind of world? And there were lively discussions. And those are the kinds of things that the JJ likes to do.
Am I correct that there's awards not only for the journalists themselves and these activists in this sense, and also a yearly music awards too to musicians?
Yes, and the musicians also, yes. So we've just announced the winners of the Jazz Awards for 2025. This is recognizing work that was done in 2024, last year. And we have a full range of artists who've won these awards. Lifetime Achievement Award went to George Coleman, a great tenor saxophone player. Musician of the Year went to Marshall Allen, the 100-year-old leader of the Sun Ra Orchestra these days. Up and coming Musician of the Year went to Isaiah Collier, a Chicago musician who's made great strides in his professionalism in the past year. And I will also mention the Composer of the Year was Myra Melford, a Chicagoan originally, and a pianist who studied with Erwin Helfer. I think you probably know Erwin, Michael. So there were a large number of Chicago-oriented winners. Tamika Reed, the cellist. Downbeat Magazine, of course, is located here in Chicago. Kahil El-Zabar won Percussionist of the Year. Kurt Elling is the male vocalist, as he has been voted for several years in a row now. And we're going to find some way to celebrate all these people here in town or at their performances during the summer, wherever they are. We'll have Jazz Journalists Association members present them with their certificates, framed certificates.
Did Alice Coltrane get some kind of award? Because we used her music bringing you into this segment.
Well, Alice, there was an album of hers, I think a Carnegie Hall performance, live performance from Carnegie Hall, that was nominated in the historical recording category. That's for albums that the music was recorded at least 10 years ago. But she did not get that. She didn't win this time. That didn't go to her.
Well, you said a lot of things there, and I'm wondering just what are your thoughts about how we keep jazz alive, or what's the status of jazz these days? And I know there's a lot of crossover and fusion, and but I started listening to jazz and the Jazz Messengers and Horace Silver back in the 50s. As a young guy, I'd go to the Sutherland Lounge and places here in Chicago and hear jazz. It's wonderful music. And what is the status of jazz these days?
Well, I think it's pretty healthy. I mean, if you're going to judge everything by money, then no, we'd see that jazz is not a really well-funded enterprise. But in terms of creativity and dedication, musicians and the listeners both represent people who are devoted to enjoying life with a jazz soundtrack. Let me put it that way. I think there's a lot of activity in Chicago, and it's from the grassroots up. It's people who want to play, and then they find a place to play together and to invite people to come to hear them. And there are audiences that are gathering around these venues and these musicians and supporting them. We have at least two really great jazz festivals in this city, the Hyde Park Jazz Festival and the Chicago Jazz Festival. We have about a dozen venues that put on music all the time. We have a great radio station, jazz radio station in WDCB.
Yeah.
And also schools. They're teaching jazz at Columbia College, at DePaul, at Northwestern, and in the high schools. And also the Jazz Institute of Chicago, which I'm a board member of, does a lot of support work, and Orbert Davis's Jazz Philharmonic. There's just so much going on here. It's a great scene. And this is true really across the country, I think. People say, oh, there's no jazz here. But you dig a little bit and just scratch the surface, and every town seems to have somebody who's a player or a teacher or a composer or recording artist who's traveling. And there's just a lot of activity. And I think we take it for granted because it's American music and it's around us all the time. And we're not even startled to hear a saxophone or a trumpet or a swinging drummer. We just take it. That's our environment. That's the music of our time and place.
You coming on the show brought back a lot of memories for me. And I used to have a place called the Heartland Cafe, and where the show originated. And I got a little list I'm going to read off of some of the people who played there. We had Hamid Drake, Bobby Irving, who played with Miles Davis, Ken Vandermark, Charlie Hayden, Fred Anderson, Billy Brimfield, Kalon Phil Coran, William Perry, and David Boykin. And then we had a good friend of ours, Lauren Deutsch, who was the head of the Chicago Jazz Institute, and she's been on the show. So there's a lot of good memories that you brought up. And one that I brought up that came to back in was Bix Beiderbecke. Now he didn't play the Heartland, but I worked at Lake Forest Academy washing dishes in the early 60s. And I remember hearing that he had gone to Lake Forest Academy and would sneak out and go down to Chicago to play music.
Yeah. Well, Bix is before my time too, but jazz really did come together, cohere in Chicago. They talk about it starting in New Orleans, and there's certainly great players in New Orleans, but they came to Chicago for opportunity. And, Louis Armstrong and King Oliver and Kid Ory, the whole flock of them emigrated to Chicago. And this was, of course, during the Great Migration, in any case, of Black Americans moving more to the north. And this is where the music came together. It did get promoted more once people like Armstrong went to New York. There was a scene in New York already, but he energized it, I would say, showing up with Fletcher Henderson's band, playing with Coleman Hawkins there. So Chicago has a long history of being deeply generative of this music. Sonny Rollins came here in the 50s to get himself straight, and he had influenced a lot of musicians here. We just continue to raise great jazz musicians. You've mentioned a lot of them. Fred Anderson, one of the earliest people I heard, used to play at a coffee house also in Evanston that was run by the Unitarian Church. And as a high school student, I discovered that and went down frequently to hear him.
Well, we had William Perry put on some jazz sets on Sunday afternoons when I had also, in addition to the Heartland, a place called the No Exit. And that place continues to endure. It's called Lay Piano, and they do jazz sets there. Let me ask you a little bit about jazz journalists. Journalism has really been affected by the changes in communication. And I'm wondering, what are the outlets for jazz writers like yourself? I used to read Downbeat regularly, haven't seen it in a while. What's the status of jazz journalism these days?
Well, you're right. I mean, media in general has been affected by the rise of the internet, and print media is no longer the only place people get their information. But Downbeat is still published monthly, and it's looking pretty good. It's a thick magazine, often 100 pages. Jazz Times magazine, that had been a very strong rival of Downbeat, went out of business, but now it has been brought back. It's online only so far, but it's being published out of England. Of course, it's, again, international because it's online, so it doesn't only have an English perspective. In fact, the editor is David Adler, who is a Jazz Journalists Association member. I knew him in New York for a long time. He's living in England now because his wife is a veterinarian who got a job in Leeds. But David helped us publish last year a book called The Jazz Omnibus, photos, 21st century photos and writings by members of the Jazz Journalists Association. This is an anthology, 600 pages with photos and an index and a bibliography, selected bibliography. And that's a collection of some really great writing that shows the breadth of jazz journalism, what it can do. And of course, you're asking about the platforms for jazz journalism now. So besides monthly magazines like Downbeat and Jazz Times, the New York City Jazz Record, Chicago's Jazz Magazine, there are also publications like Earshot Jazz out of Seattle, small Hot House Jazz Magazine out of Newark, New Jersey, So those are places that people are still writing. Of course, they write liner notes often. There are some reviews in daily newspapers. Here in Chicago, we have Hannah Edgar writing very well about both jazz and classical composition concerts. And then there's online platforms like Pitchfork, Bandcamp, that also publish jazz journalism. So there are outlets. You have to dig for them a little bit, but they're there. And just like the music, the musicians they play this music because they love to. And the jazz journalists are the same. We write about jazz because we're driven to do it. We love doing it. We love listening and trying to elucidate what we're hearing in words that can communicate to people who don't have quite the insight or the experience that we have. So it's a communicative tool.
Howard, let me ask you how you were driven to be a jazz aficionado and then a writer and, your life of jazz. How did you get started here in Chicago?
Well, I grew up on the South Side in South Shore, and I was hearing black music on the radio, and I liked it. I liked rock and roll too, but it always seemed to me that jazz instrumental music was more interesting. It was not giving me the words that I had to pay attention to, but offering me an alternative, a sounds, trying to figure out sounds, trying to sharpen my listening, understanding what I was hearing, understanding why other people would make those sounds, what they were trying to convey. And I got interested in it, and I took some piano lessons, and then I took flute lessons for a while, and I found the Jazz Record Mart, Bob Kester's home for Del Mar. And that was a great place. I kind of interned there, hung out, swept the floors, read all the liner notes that were on the back of records at that time, listened to everything, people coming through, met Joe Siegel, who ran the Jazz Showcase, and then musicians who would stop by, like Betty Carter, Roland Kirk, Rahsaan Roland Kirk, and the blues musicians who would come in to pick up their checks from Bob Kester. So I met Jimmy Dawkins and Junior Wells. It was just fascinating, and the people were so cool. They were just such interesting characters, and had the passion, for what they were doing. And it just all made sense to me, and I just kept following it. I was surprised that music that I thought was a really unique characteristics was not getting written about at all. That was the music of the Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians, the AACM, which was sort of coming together in Hyde Park and on the South Side. And since I lived nearby, I would attend concerts at University of Chicago and eventually at a place called Child City. It's 87th and Jeffrey. And every time I went and heard some AACM music, it just didn't sound like anything else. And these people were serious about what they were doing. And I thought, well, I can write about this. Nobody else is writing about it, or very few people. Actually, Terry Martin, John Litweiler, J.B. Figge, Chuck Nessa were already doing some writing about the AACM. I'm the next generation after those guys. But I was able to write for the Chicago Daily News, the Reader, Illinois Entertainer, and I got good feedback from what I was doing. So I kept doing it, and look where it's gotten me.
Well, this is really good talking to you. I want everyone to know that you have some books out too. The Future Jazz, Oxford University Press, Miles Ornette, Cecil, Jazz Beyond Jazz. And I would like to formally invite you to come back on the show for another session, because you keep bringing up memories. The South Shore, my dad grew up there, Hyde Park High. McKee Fitzhugh, Disc Jockey Show Lounge, all these places, all these people. The Jazz Record Mart. I met Michael Bloomfield and Charlie Musselwhite back there in 1962 there in Roosevelt University building on Wacker.
Yeah.
So I want to really thank you for coming on and sharing, but I also want to really thank you doubly for the memories that you have fostered in myself, because I love the music. My wife keeps playing certain things over and over. But I got a lot of old records. Anyhow, Howard Mandel, quite a guy, a great journalist, and we'll have you back on the Heartland.
Thank you very much, Michael. Nice to be here.
All right.